Well, I don't even remember what our theme was tonight, but Nora's story reminded me of a story that's similar but not exactly the same. This story I learned from a wonderful storyteller whose name I can't remember, but it's from the 20th anniversary of the National Storytelling Association. You'll find it in that book, and I will find her name. And this is called The Wish Ring. Once, a long time ago, there were two farms, and on these two farms there was a young man and a young woman. And as time passed by, the young man grew up and the young woman grew up, and they were friends and they played together and were neighbors and they worked together, and before long, of course, the young man and the young woman, they fell in love and of course were married, and they were pretty poor, but their parents gave them a small plot of land and their own tiny little house, and they lived together in that small house and that small plot of land, eking out a living together happily. Now every day, the young man, he would go out into the woods with his axe and he would cut trees and he'd bring back the wood to sell in town so that he can get just a few coins to buy the few things they needed. And during the day, the wife would stay at home and she'd tend the gardens and the one animal they had and the vegetables and make sure they had enough food to eat. And everything was fine. They were poor, but they were happy. Now, each day when the man went out into the forest to gather wood, he went pretty far, so his wife would make a small bundle for him. They never had very much, so she would take just a piece of cheese and a little bit of water and a hunk of stale bread, and they would mix it all up and tie it, and he'd put it on a stick, and he'd have his stick and food on one shoulder and his axe on the other shoulder, and his wife would kiss him and off he'd go into the woods. Now, on this day he walked long and far because he didn't like to cut down standing trees. He'd like to look for the trees that had already fallen, for he knew the standing trees would come in handy when they needed them at another time. And he walked long and far until he was tired, and he decided to sit down and have his meal for the day. And just as he sat down, an old woman came out of the woods. She was all bent over with a cane. "Hello, Sonny. Do you think I could have some food? I'm awfully hungry." "Sure, grandmother," said the young man. I don't have much, but you may have half of what I have." And so he took that cheese and he broke it in two and he gave half to the old woman. He took that stale bread and he broke it in two and he gave half to the old woman, and he poured out that water and gave half, and together they ate the meal in silence. And when they had finished and the man had tied up all the leftover junk and got ready to go chop some wood, the old woman said, "Hold on, Sonny, you have done me a good turn and I want to do you a good turn. So, if you were to walk for 3 days straight, you would come to a giant elm tree. And if you were to cut down that tree, something would fall from the sky that would make your dreams come true." Well, the young man didn't know what to make of that. He thanked the old woman and he went off to chop wood, and he scratched his head. When he turned around, she was no longer to be seen. Well, he gathered all the wood he could that day, and he brought it back to his wife, and he told her about the strange woman he met. He said, "So do you think I should go? Do you think I should go and try to find my dreams?" "Well," said the wife, "we have nothing to lose and it'll be a long trip, but yes, I think you should go." And so she packed even a little extra into his little bag, and he went off. And following that old woman's words, he walked for 3 long days straight from that spot, until by the end of the 3rd day he found himself under a great elm tree. That night he slept under that tree, and he had the most magnificent dreams he had ever had. And when he awoke, he took his axe and he began to cut down that tree. It was hard work, for it was a huge tree. But as he cut and cut, the tree began to sway, and from its branches tumbled a nest. And out of that nest, as it hit the ground, an egg rolled to his feet and broke open. And there, before him, stood a tiny chick and a gold ring. And before his eyes, whoosh, the chick grew into a giant eagle and soared off into the air and circled his head as that ring set at his feet. And that eagle, who had been a chick, called down to him and said, "Take the ring! Ah! It is a wish ring! Place it on your finger and turn it 3 times. But be careful, for it only contains 1 wish, and it will give you whatever is in your heart." And with that, the eagle disappeared into the sky. Well, the young man, he picked up the plain gold ring and he slipped it onto his finger. And he began to make his way back home. And this time, as he made his way back home, he took a different route that found himself in a small village. And there just happened to be a jeweler store in that village, and he thought to himself, "You know what, I should check this ring out." So he walked into the jeweler store and he said, "Sir, took off that ring." He said, "What do you think this ring is worth?" And the jeweler, who wasn't a very nice man, he sort of pinched his nose and he looked at that ring. He said, "That's nothing. I have a whole case full of those rings. Take it away. I wouldn't give you even a single penny for it." "Ha ha 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 ha," laughed the young man. "But if you only knew, why, this ring is worth all the jewels you have in your shop." "Really?" said the unscrupulous jeweler. "Yes, why, this is a wish ring. It will give me my heart's desire." Well, when the jeweler heard that, he had heard of a wish ring before, and he knew that he must make it his. So he invited the young man to stay for dinner that night. He said, "Having the owner of a wish ring stay in my house will bring me good luck too." And so he gave him a great meal with lots and lots of food and lots of wine, until the man was so tired and so sleepy that he fell asleep. And once he was asleep, that jeweler went down to his store. He found a gold ring that looked exactly like that wish ring. And he slipped the wish ring off the young man's finger, and he slipped on that plain gold one. And in the morning, the young man woke up and he said, "Thank you very much. Someday I'll repay you." "Oh, that's okay. Like I said, having a wish ring owner is good luck for me." And the young man went on his way. Now, as soon as that young man was out of town, that jeweler, he flipped over his sign and said closed. He pulled down all the shades, and he took that wish ring and he turned it 3 times. He said, I wish for a mountain of gold." And no sooner had the words left his lips than pieces of gold began to fall from the sky. But they fell so fast they began to fill up his store. They covered his feet. He could not move. They filled up higher and higher and higher. He was almost drowning in gold when he crashed into the basement. The floor could not hold all the gold. Well, the noise had aroused all the neighbors. They all came running to see what was going on, and they looked inside and they saw the jeweler dead, crushed under a mountain of gold. And they all shook their heads as they left. They said, "Doubly cursed is the man who dies from the fulfillment of his wish." Well, that young man, he went back home. He went back to his wife and he told her all about the wish ring. And he said, "And do you know, wife, I've been thinking this whole time, I know just what we should wish for. We could wish for a big house and a bigger farm and everything will be great." And he grabbed the wish ring and he began to turn it, and she held his hand. You see, his wife was really smart, and so she said to him, "You know, we could wish for a bigger house and a bigger farm, but you know, if we work just a little bit harder and save just a little bit more, we can have those things and still have our wish and keep it for something really special." And because he knew his wife was very smart, he listened to her. And sure enough, a few years had passed and they had a bigger farm and they had a bigger house and they had people working for them and their life was nice. And the man still came up to his wife. He said, now that we have these things, I know exactly what we should wish for. We should wish for some children. We always wanted to have children. That's what I'm going to wish for. And he went to turn that ring and she held his hand. She said, husband, I too want children. And more than anything, but if we just wait a little bit longer and work just a little bit harder, I'm sure we will have children. And if we don't, then I will gladly wish for them. And again, because he knew his wife was so smart, he listened to her. And sure enough, a few years had passed and they had a daughter and a son and another daughter. And now the house was filled. And again, the man came up and said, now we should wish for gold so that we could retire and just live a nice, happy life. That's what I'm going to wish for. And he went to turn that ring and she said, no, oh, wait. We have a lot. We have our farm and we have children, and if we just save just a little bit more and work just a little bit harder, we'll have gold enough to retire. And again, he listened to his smart wife, and again, sure enough, a few years passed and they had everything they needed to retire. And that's how it went. Sometimes he would come up with different ideas for the wish ring, but she would always come up with a reason why they should wait and keep it for something special. And as the years went on and the years went by, he would come to her less and less with ideas for the wish ring. He never forgot he had it. He would turn it often, every day, but he would never keep a wish in his heart. And the years went by and the years went on and the children grew up. And then nature was very good to them, for the husband and wife died together the same night. And the son and the two daughters, they got together and they got their parents ready to say goodbye, to bury them. And the son, he looked at that ring and he said, you know, I should keep this ring, keep it as a memento of our parents. But the eldest daughter, she sort of held the hand. He said, no. You know, in all the time that I knew Father, he never ever took that ring off. I think Mother gave it to him as a present. I think that they should be buried with it. And so it was that the young man and his wife were buried with the wish ring that really wasn't a wish ring. And yet, it brought all their heart's wishes to come true.